Greetings, travelers. Today I will be discussing tendencies. Tendencies are something that arise in a being when they have an inclination towards one specific vein of action or thought. As an example, a nice person might have a tendency to help someone they meet on the road, greet themselves polite. Someone who is rude may have the tendency to spit on the grass outside. They may have the tendency to roll their eyes after someone makes a comment that they find idiotic. These are things that you don't necessarily think of doing, you just do instinctively. However, there are a couple of things that are more major, and these are more drastic tendencies. I'll be discussing a few of these today. The first one that comes to mind is an acquaintance I once had named Gregory. Now, since I met him, I have drifted away and kept my distance for reasons that will soon become obvious. But I originally met Gregory essentially when I'm early in my travels. He was just a standard guy, a warrior, and he had the tendency to eat the things that he has killed. Now, this isn't necessarily odd by itself. For example, a hunter tends to eat their own kills. You might find a serial killer that eats their victims. Gregory was somewhat in the same vein. After a battle, he would occasionally partake upon his victims. I can't say I agree with it, but you can see where his actions may come from. However, he didn't just eat living beings. The first time I saw something odd was when we traveled to a world with some higher technology, and there was, well, computers there, of course. And as you may know, computers can crash, which can be killing them, basically. Now you can see where I'm going with this, of course, but Gregory would eat the computers after he caused them to crash, which was surprisingly often. I'm not sure how he did that, but it was odd. However, I accepted it. He has his quirks. It's not like it was hurting him, he was strong enough to eat the metal and circuits and all that. But the true reason why I distanced myself from him was about 5 years on and off of knowing him. We traveled together occasionally, did some, I guess you'd call them quests together. And there was an after party on one of the major campaigns we partook on. And it was a fine party. I mean, it wasn't great. It was just, 5 to 10 guys partying, drinking some, eating some. And then Gregory came in, and I won't say what he said, but he immediately killed the mood. Now, you may notice that I said the word killed the mood. And in this context, you will be right to think that he ate the mood after he killed it. The mood of the party. It was one of the earliest things that really freaked me out. Now, some of you weaker beings might not know, but concepts shouldn't just be eaten. It's not physical. In order to eat them, you have to either be extraordinarily powerful or to have something truly odd with you. And well, Gregory had something odd with him. What was even more important, however, was that no one even mentioned it after it happened. Now, this happens a bit more often than you might think, mainly because my mental protections are sufficient enough that generally it's the other people that are caused to forget or to overlook something that has been enchanted. Nevertheless, this was an automatic reaction. And quite frankly, it is blatantly obvious to notice when something that has part of your mood has been eaten. The fact that it has not implies that Gregory was possessed, had some extraordinary power. Regardless, as you should know, the first step of any long-lasting, potentially immortal being after encountering something that freaks them out is to immediately run away and never contact them again. And naturally, that's what I did. Now, I won't say that I'm not curious about why that occurred, but I have strayed away from him for many, many years now, and while it's likely he is dead, there's no reason to risk that chance. So now I will get on a bit of a lighter topic, one that I found was a bit more enjoyable for myself to see. There was a priest, acolyte, whatever you want to call him, who had the tendency to just accept the blessings of most gods that they encountered. Now, I never actually learned this guy's name since he was quite secretive, and one of the gods that he believed in was against, personal ideals like your own name. Again, not something I agree with, but gods are gods, you know what they're like. So, this was earlier on in his journey when I saw him. Earlier on in mine, I would say it was in my first millennium. He, well, had two main gods that he was associated with. One of the original gods apparently he was with died off, but it's unfortunate. What can you do? That was likely what actually caused him to go after as many gods as possible so it wouldn't happen again. Oh, I guess I should mention, since you guys might not be aware of it, but if you are attached to a god as a being that is blessed by that god, when that god dies, all of the powers that were blessed to you are immediately stripped away as quickly as possible, and it's painful to say the least, because it's sort of like sewn into your soul, tied to your being. Regardless, these two gods, one was, it would be a standard, stereotypical evil god, blood sacrifices, killing innocents, all of that good stuff. The standard. And then there was a more neutral god. This was a god of pilgrimages or something similar, the god of personal change, all of that. So, once he got them both, he realized that the god of pilgrimages didn't actually care if the pilgrimages were finished. And the god of sacrifices didn't mind one bit about using those pilgrimagers as the sacrifices. So, you can probably see where this is going, but he got a lot powerful by organizing pilgrimages and taking, 100 to 1,000 people across the continent, all the way to some holy relic, holy city, wherever the pilgrimages decide. That god basically announced the location every so often. I'd say every year, but on the plane it was on, years are quite a bit longer. I'd say it was more 3 and 3/4 of a year about. Bit hard to tell the time difference from so long ago. So he essentially got those large group of pilgrimagers, and he, well, took them on a trip. This trip lasted months since it had to be on foot, as this god demanded. And the idea was that once you finished your pilgrimages, you got blessed by the god helped you in some way, a minor boon. As the sacrificial god, it was enforced that all the sacrifices had to naturally not be aware of the sacrifice, and they all had to be killed unknowingly. It's a bit odd for a evil god. Generally, they like to spout their usefulness and intense evilness. So, they want to announce to the world that, hey, if you believe in me, you can get super powerful by sacrificing all these people. And, well, it's pretty obvious what happened there. He gradually killed off all the pilgrimagers as they came along. Standard stuff. Poison, cliffs with illusions, inviting bandits, all of that. The most important part, of course, was hiding the fact that he was associated with all these deaths. But you know how that goes. Eventually, someone's going to find out. Which again brings me back to how it ended and how I'm no longer associated with it. I actually didn't take part in it, but It's generally good to have acquaintances who are associated with evil gods, so you know what's happening and you can anticipate any major events. Like, some god is planning on sacrificing a city, you don't want to be in that city. Quite easy to see why. So, I kept an eye on it. Naturally, I also realized that some of the believers of the not so evil gods started to take note. The god of pilgrimages didn't really care that they died on their travels, so he wasn't part of it. However, the good god, the standard stereotypical good gods, god of light, the god of holiness or whatever, god of healing, and some of the neutral ones. They eventually tracked them down, the paladins with a sense of good in their heart. Well, killed them. It's pretty simple. It's not much else you can do about somebody who sacrifices so much. And, well, that's how it ended. And it's another reason to keep in mind about the third tendency I'm going to mention. You should never do anything that will draw attention to yourself over time. At most, you could do it once before you pack your bags and leave to the other continents in the world. Just go away. Nothing should track back to you, nothing should trace back to you. If they realize you exist, it's already too late. So the third tendency is something that I associate with myself, and it's the tendency to make things end. If you have a long-lasting life, naturally things will continue very long time, infinitely if you're good enough. And, well, if things last an infinite amount of time, anything that has a small percentage of happening is almost certainly going to happen. If every year, let's say, you have got a 5% chance of getting into a minor or major accident with a car. Now, this might not be super common since most people may get into a couple of minor scruffles and scuffles and accidents during their time driving, especially if they drive most days of the week. But eventually, in a lengthy period of time, you're certain to get into car crashes often and repeatedly. With a 5% chance, that's like every 20 years you're likely to get into one minor or major car accident. And then that means every 20 years you're going to get into a new accident. So if you live 100 years, and starting from birth to the end of your life, that is 5 accidents. However, if you live 1,000 years, that's 10 times more, so that's 50 accidents. So you can see where I'm going with this, hopefully at least. More and more accidents means you're more and more likely to get into deadly accidents. Therefore, the next thing you should always do is reduce these chances. You should not be driving if your body cannot handle an accident if you're going to live forever. It's fine, of course, if you're strong enough, but if you're just a regular guy that just happened to become immortal, snap, it happened. Stop driving. Walk places. Hopefully, don't go anywhere close to anything that can cause accidents. Ideally, you'd stay in a secure location until you're strong enough to go outside, where there's hopefully no accidents. So, of course, this brings me to the tendency that I mentioned earlier to make things final. The main thing you need to realize is that when you live long enough, any enemies that you might have are going to likely want revenge. It's quite simple. If you live long enough, you're going to make enemies no matter how careful you are. It might be something simple where, you accidentally bump into somebody on the sidewalk and they might just want to hit you or bump you back someday. It's nothing major, but since they're thinking about you, they're going to want to do something. And that's something you don't want. So this is, of course, more important for any major event, not just a bump on the road. But if there's some guy that is super politically powerful, or the son of someone politically powerful, and they are really annoyed with you for some reason, for something you did, maybe you own something they want, maybe they have something you wanted, you benched it, and now they're worried about you for some reason. You've got 2 reasons to continue here. So, reason number 1, you do not want anything bad to happen to you, and they are, at this point, an enemy. And the second reason is that You don't want to die. It's that simple. You don't want to go to jail, you don't want to die, you want to stay safe. So you've got two options here. Well, three, actually. I guess I'll mention a third first, since it's the most dangerous at this point, especially if you're weaker at this time, is to make peace. Now, this might work in some situations. Naturally, you gotta take it as it goes. But if, they're amicable, it's pretty easy. But if they're not, it's not even worth doing. Now, naturally, on Earth, this is less of an issue, so it's a safer environment. But in the more dangerous parts of Earth, and on other worlds where it's just not peaceful, you will, unfortunately, be forced to make one of two decisions: run away, or make it so they can't come after you. So naturally, making so they can't come after you references killing them, disabling them, or something similar. This is the far, far more dangerous option, as anyone with any knowledge of families or anything of the sort should know. If you finish someone off, someone else is likely to come after you for revenge. So that leaves the main option of running away. Quite simple. If you're going to live forever, you could just skedaddle, get out of town until the person who's angry at you dies. Not many people live forever, so if you just leave town, you're good. You're fine and dandy. Most people don't bother going after you if you're not even in the same town. This, of course, changes in a place like Earth where there is enough technology that you can interact with people across the world, but even then, if you just skip town and go off the grid, what are they going to do? They could, in theory, hire a hitman or something, but that's just not something that's common. Even with the lengthy periods of time, it's just how many entities making that are all potentially going to hire a hitman. It's not going to happen unless you've done something truly stupid, and at that point, it's your fault anyway. So, going back a bit, I'll say this, why there's a tendency of mine, and what should hopefully be a tendency of yours if you ever become long lasting. It reminds me of one of my earliest mistakes that I made after I became long lasting. I essentially found something powerful in my travels that I unfortunately didn't have the sufficient skill to hide from people with well developed sight. Not literal sight, but magic sight, of course. I had a I'm not going to say what it is, of course, since it's something that I still use today, but it was let's call it an amulet. I had an amulet, wore it under my shirt. It didn't even really cross my mind that somebody in the town might be strong enough to notice it, but then there was the standard, rich kid, second generation. I mean, not really a kid. I mean, he was 40, like, still quite young, but let's just call him the rich fella across the street, the one with the mansion. They had a mage with them. This was actually quite a good mage. They was just hired out. These guys were paying way too much money for him, and that guy was fleecing him. However, he happened to notice, and part of his contract is that if any sufficiently powerful artifacts are discovered, he will tell it to the family. And, well, he saw me carrying it around, he announced to the family, and then that 40-year-old rich guy came along and demanded to buy it. I naturally said no, since I wanted it, and that immediately brought me to the two options. Well, three, of course. First off, I could try to get an amicable solution. Not going to happen, since they really wanted the artifact, and I did not want to go to them. So I could either finish them off or run away. Unfortunately, at this time, I was quite prideful of myself. I just got out of essentially powering up, and so I finished the guy off. Made it till they wouldn't come after me. And, well, since I'm telling this story, you could probably imagine it didn't go so well. Kind of just went up the chain until more and more people were hired to come after me, and this is essentially the event that caused me to go more towards running away at the first sign of trouble in time anything happens. And, well, not much more to the story there, since I don't want to get too many details into my personal life, because I know some of you are listening for some ill-gotten means. Well, That's pretty much it for the tendencies that I'm willing to share. My personal opinion is that if you have any lengthy tendencies that are harmful to yourself, you should naturally try to dissuade them from ever happening. This affected me when my tendency towards making things final started leaning more towards the direction of finishing things off. That event forced me to reconsider my thought process and go towards running away. Cowardism is only cowardism if you don't survive. Nobody can call you a coward if they don't even see you. So, if you've got a bad tendency, my personal suggestion is to think back about all the times that that tendency has gotten you into a bad situation. If you tend to be violent, get angry, think back to all the times that you have been violent or angry. And if it's been enough times that it's become a problem, I would highly suggest talking to somebody about it. I know many of you aren't sufficiently strong in the soul department. So self enlightenment is difficult to come by. Essentially, I'm not saying, oh, I've got a brilliant idea, I'll change myself. I'm talking about meditating for 3 centuries on a topic. None of you are going to be, sorry, not none of you. I know some of you are longer lasting than others, but most of you are going to last 3 centuries in deep meditation on your self reflection. So, the easiest way, without causing too much danger, is to find someone you trust and talk to them. This could just be a psychiatrist, for example, you hire, a family member, a lover, a brother, or a sister. Naturally, you want to talk about this. If you are longer lasting, however, going on immortality at least, it is dangerous to discuss your tendencies with others before you fix them. This is because anyone who is sufficiently powerful with mental persuasion can essentially alter your thought processes to aid them if they know what your tendencies are and if you're trying to fix them. This could be just someone who is a sufficiently powerful psychic that finds out that you've got the tendency and is just thinking, oh, this guy wants to stop being angry. Well, I will be somebody who angers him slightly. So then he's got to be nice to me, and then he's going to have to feel bad because he's in his self enlightenment phase and he's got to help me. And then yada yada yada, you're now stuck with him for a couple of centuries because he figured out your problems and then he caused them to hurt him. That, of course, may worse if you're a good enough person, but what can you do? So, I'll reiterate, if you got a bad tendency, solve it before it becomes too much of a problem. And on the final note, I think I'll talk a bit more about some good tendencies, since I don't think I've really gone through them much. A good tendency is something that aids you. Now, this is, like I mentioned previously, one of mine is running away at the first sign of trouble. You can see it as not good because it might cause you to lose something important, but it keeps you alive, and that's the main thing that matters. What on some lighter good tendency? Something that some of you with shorter lives might care about more. This is the thing like being polite and opening the door to somebody who's following after you, saying that you love your family and your parents. These things are good to have and something that's nice to develop. My personal suggestion will always be that if you've got a bad tendency, to try to change it out for a good tendency. This is purposeful. If you've got that tendency to start yelling, you should instead have the tendency to listen. So, if somebody is discussing with you, just after you've tried to fix the problem, start closing your mouth more. Do the opposite of what your bad tendency does. And this way you can improve yourself, and hopefully over a long enough period, you can be a better person and live far longer than anyone else. Well, thank you for listening to my brilliant ramblings. I know this will help you, but it is always important to improve yourself. And, of course, listen to me more.